The company of good friends were chatting happily at the table. As soon as supper was ready, the master of the land, Soma, was called to the table, and the lad, distracted from his thoughts, hurried to his friends. This beautiful place was quite remote from large settlements and busy roads, and therefore only a few people lived here. That's why Soma stay in this peaceful place and enjoy the quiet. The young lad felt really in charge and loved in this place. Surrounded by friends, it was wonderful to just live and enjoy his successes. It wasn't long before the young lad finally got home and rushed to familiarize himself with an exciting new game, the release of which Takuya Soma had been eagerly awaiting for many months. This incredibly adventurous game offered to master countless different professions, and also promised to present wonderful story moves. For the sake of this new game, avid gamer Takuya Soma even took time off work and prepared a huge stock of food, so as not to be distracted from the game at all and if possible to pass it at once. Everything was ready and the joystick was habitually in his hands, approaching incredible adventures. To begin with, the game offered to enter your name, and Soma did not make up anything and indicated his real name. Next, it was necessary to specify the age, and the guy thought about this question, because you can specify absolutely any age. In fact, the keen gamer was 24 years old and he was not embarrassed by such a hobby, although at his age, many peers have long since married and forgot about virtual adventures. But at the moment, Soma only wondered whether there was a paid subscription in this game. And even if there's one, then at the beginning of the adventure must necessarily be a trial period, and then you will need to necessarily donate. Next showed the menu with the choice of profession, and the number really boggled the mind. Soma in no other game has not seen such an extensive choice. The guy thought about what choice he should make, because the future path in the game depends on it. Soma decided that it would be nice to stand up a real king and rule an entire country. It was also interesting to acquire the profession of an adventurer and enjoy true freedom in choosing his path. Another tempting option for choosing a profession was the role of an assassin. The image of a mysterious assassin could take the lives of bad guys and get good money for it. But this time the experienced gamer decided to choose a profession to make his job as difficult as possible. After revisiting the entire list of possible professions many times, Soma settled on choosing the role of a border lord. The profession of a border lord involved living in and ruling desert lands where there are hardly any people. In this incredibly dangerous place, the hero could be attacked by demons at any time, but even without the terrible monsters, life itself was too harsh here. Therefore, it was necessary to train his abilities and beautify the entire area. Sipping a strong cup of coffee, Soma decided that such a job requiring all these elements sounded really challenging and would therefore be an exciting adventure in a new world. Quickly reading the description again, the guy was convinced that this was indeed the right choice and confirmed his decision. The main skills of a border lord turned out to be inspiration, which could be used to motivate his men, and rage, which increased the status of the lord himself. Both of these necessarily required followers, and Soma realized that one of the immediate goals of both his game would be to gather followers. Then an information window appeared asking him to confirm his final choice, and in doing so the message warned that it would be impossible to return after his final choice. The experienced gamer was excited for new adventures and of course rushed to confirm his final choice, for it should be done faster since he had waited so long for the release of this new game. Immediately after pressing the confirmation button, something happened that Soma did not expect at all. The guy lost consciousness and did not even realize how it happened, in his body, as if for some reason dictated to switch off consciousness like an electrical power. Before opening his eyes, Soma felt a slight puff of wind, and unfamiliar odors were clearly not native to his room. Opening his eyes, the experienced gamer saw trees, a dilapidated house, and a bright sun in front of him. Soma looked around a few times and didn't recognize the place he found himself in at all. After all, it was impossible to be somewhere outside the city in such a way that he didn't remember it. At the same time, the guy noticed that he was wearing completely unfamiliar clothes and wondered if it could be just a game. Then Soma pinched his face a few times and was finally convinced that this was not a dream, but reality. Taking a few cautious steps forward, Soma noticed a strange translucent ball on the ground. Giving into his sense of curiosity, Soma picked up the unknown object, and suddenly something strange appeared in front of his face. Unable to stop wondering, the experienced gamer immediately recognized the familiar image. It was the very real status window that the guy had met countless times in virtual computer games. Soma remembered the internet commercial about the new game he had bought and immediately recognized the terrain around him. It was hard to believe, but the only explanation for what was happening was that he was in this game. Realizing this left Som confused, and there was a slight hope that this was just an ordinary game that was made too realistic. But after looking around again, the guy realized that it wasn't. Soma then proceeded to the dilapidated hut and realized that this place was probably his territory in this game anyway. Thanks to the information window, Soma learnt that the status of his territory was weak, and the development of agriculture and industry was 1 unit. Then the experienced gamer remembered that judging from the description, this territory is a dangerous place, and so he needs to raise the level of his territory as soon as possible. How exactly to do this for Soma was not clear, and the guy decided to find a way to level up and secure his territory, and then paid attention to a strange hut. At first glance, this structure looked long abandoned as the walls were darkened and huge cracks were clearly letting in the cold evening wind. Soma decided that since there was nothing more suitable nearby, he would probably have to settle in this dilapidated house. Once inside, Soma was horrified by what he saw, for his worst fears were confirmed. Inside, this hut looked even worse than outside and resembled not a house, but some dilapidated barn, and it was difficult to imagine how it was possible to live here at all. Opening the interactive status window again, Soma found out that the strength of this old hut was at 0. And to restore it to its normal state, it required 5 units of E-class wood. There was also a warning about the threat of total destruction of this structure. Soma rejoiced at being able to see information about all items, for it was indeed a handy ability, although in this case, it was very hard to read about the horrifying condition of this hut. Soma wondered if this hut would really be transformed and become more livable if he tried to raise the level of this dwelling and rebuild it. If that was the case, he would have to search for the necessary E-grade wood as soon as possible. From the description of the wood, Soma thought that it should not be too rare, in which case it might be found somewhere nearby. After all, one didn't want to walk far in an unfamiliar area. The first dry branch that came across was exactly the same E-grade wood, and Soma realized what he was looking for. Gathering such wood turned out to be quite easy and convenient, and soon Soma was able to collect a sufficient pile of dry branches. After searching for wood, Soma hurried back to the house to see if this amount of wood would be enough to rebuild the hut, for he did not want to fail. Inside, the game menu offered to raise the level of the old hut, and Soma was happy about this opportunity and decided to confirm his choice, because he wanted to make his home more habitable. Before clicking on the confirmation button, the experienced gamer wondered whether the improvement would really happen automatically and instantly, or whether it would still take some time for the process to take place. In the end, Soma all decided to confirm his choice, because if it is not done, it will never be possible to find out. But immediately after pressing the button, the magically mined wood magically turned into wood material, specifically planks. Also a hammer and nails appeared beside them. Soma resented the fact that he had to do it all by hand, and the worst part was that he only had 30 minutes to do it. The boy began hastily picking up boards and hammering them into the places that seemed most dilapidated. After this tedious work, it could not be said with certainty that the hut began to look much better. Soma felt incredibly tired, because the work of an office employee for a long time did not involve physical exertion, and to visit the gym the guy did not like. At the same time, the experienced gamer found out that he managed to prevent only the collapse of the hut. At this point, his dwelling had reached 1 unit of strength, and for the next improvement required 10 units of wood class E. After resting for a bit, Soma remembered that the materials screen indicated blacksmithing. And it would be interesting to see if it was possible to make some weapons this way. Feeling intensely curious, Soma decided to quickly familiarize himself with blacksmithing and confirmed his choice in the available menu. Immediately after this selection, something strange happened. As it turned out, the remaining pile of wood turned into some sort of ordinary stick, and Soma decided to find out if it was indeed a finished product. The information menu said that it was indeed a wooden stick and it belonged to weapon class E. It was also possible through blacksmithing and using 10 units of stone to create a stone spear, which additionally possessed the ability of a muscle. The resulting wooden stick looked like a rather simple weapon that was too thin and light and could hardly serve as a reliable defense. That's why the experienced gamer decided to find out as soon as possible about the possible improvement of the weapon and getting some kind of spear. Once again diving into the information window, Soma learnt that his industrial value was increased by 1 unit. This success made Soma very happy, and the guy decided that it is necessary to make as many different items as possible. It will increase the points of the territory. And after increasing the territory points, it will be possible to secure his area. After that, the experienced gamer went again to collect useful wood and at the same time to explore his new territory, which looked very cozy corner of nature. Gradually, the process of exploration very much enjoyed. Soma would Class E managed to create a spear. At first glance, the spear looked much better than an ordinary wooden stick, but Soma decided not to stop there and improve his weapon. But to further improve the weapon, it was necessary to get hold of D-grade wood as well as E-grade stone. And after improving the spear, the muscles had to be strengthened by 2 units. Soma realized that the vast amount of wood he had collected was not suitable for improving the weapon. The experienced gamer decided to try to cut down some trees, because perhaps such wood was more suitable for improving weapons. But as soon as Soma was near a suitable tree, he noticed a strange movement in the low grass, and then suddenly a jelly-like substance began to approach him. Thanks to the knowledge gained from numerous computer games, Soma immediately recognized the creature, which was an ordinary slime. Soma realized that since this kind of slime exists in this world, then most likely in the future we can expect to meet more dangerous demons and monsters. But at this moment, the experienced gamer decided to find out exactly what kind of slime this slime was. There were few options, because usually slime differs in its strength and can be completely harmless or still one that can threaten. Soma decided to test the strength of this slime with a stick, because if it was really strong, it would be quite difficult to deal with it. Actively hitting it with the wooden stick had no effect as the slime moved incredibly fast and even managed to successfully counterattack. But to the surprise of the experienced gamer, the attacks of the fast slime were completely painless and Soma stopped fighting back with the stick, because it was useless anyway. After a bit of a break, the experienced gamer still decided to test the strength of the slime, and having picked a convenient moment, Soma still managed to strike a precise blow, which sent the slime far into the thicket, as if it was a baseball. But just a moment later, from the same thicket appeared a few more slimes, and it was already an unpleasant surprise for an experienced gamer, as waving a stick on a very hot day was quite tiring. But there was nothing else left but to defend himself, and Soma put forward his not too effective weapon and confidently declared that the slugs could attack. Having spent a lot of energy on this battle, Soma decided to just lie down and rest, because the local nature perfectly allowed to do so. The weather was really hot, but the shade from the experienced gamer was happy with his first victory in this new world, although it was certainly understandable that the slug attacks were not particularly effective. But Soma admitted to himself that his many attacks with the wooden stick, too, were largely ineffective. The experienced gamer decided that it wouldn't be a bad idea if he had a subordinate who could fight such slugs, because he himself was too ineffective for such a thing, and waving a wooden stick all the time was very tedious. But during this battle, something important was learned. From such monsters, demon stones would appear and they could be used in the future. In this situation, the slugs managed to obtain E-rank demon stones. After putting the obtained magic stones in his pocket, Soma decided that it was time to finish with the rest and remembered about the nearby vast field, which should also be examined. Upon reaching the field, the experienced gamer was surprised to find a rather ordinary cucumber bush. Such vegetables would be good for food in any case, and Soma rejoiced at such a useful find. Soma decided that if he picked these vegetables, they would surely grow again since this bush looked quite good. The increased hunger greatly increased the desire to pick the cucumbers, and so there was no time to worry about any consequences. The hand deftly plucked a rather weighty vegetable and at that moment approvingly made a rumbling sound. Without thinking about caution, Soma took a bite of the vegetable, and it indeed turned out to be the most ordinary cucumber. After that, the experienced gamer thought about how quickly the next cucumber would grow. For him, one such vegetable would not be enough and hunger would not go anywhere. Suddenly, while eating the cucumber, Soma had an idea to take up vegetable growing. The guy reopened his information window and learned that this area is called the Harsh Fields, and to improve this field just need E-class magic stones in the amount of 3 units. That was how many magic stones Soma was able to obtain during the destruction of the slugs, and now it was possible to upgrade the level of the Harsh Field. Then a choice appeared, and the game menu offered to increase the amount of vegetables grown or buy a different variety. Such a strange choice made the experienced gamer think, for he never liked to act too hastily. In the end, the young researcher decided that it was still not a good idea to simply add more cucumbers, but to emphasize the variety of food grown. By applying the enhancement with magic stones this time, the experienced gamer received a small spatula and a watering can filled with water. As in the situation of repairing the hut, everything had to be done with his own hands, and it was not a very pleasant surprise. It became apparent that Soma essentially had to manage his own level of improvement, and so he had a lot of work to do in the future, and most unpleasantly, the work turned out to be physical. After the grueling labor, improving the harsh fields increased the farming rate by 1 unit, and the next improvement required 3 E-class magic stones. Also, improving the field allowed one to grow not only cucumbers but also tomatoes. But unfortunately, any vegetables, be it cucumbers or tomatoes, needed time to grow, and one could only wait for the results of one's labor. Soma realized that at this point he would have to get to work on getting food outside the field as soon as possible, and immediately thought of the nearby river. It was also interesting to survey the forest where there might be berries or nuts. The constant rumbling in his stomach made him hurry his explorations, and Soma went ahead. 1 cucumber was clearly not enough for a grown lad, and it was obvious that if Soma kept moving and remained hungry, it would lead to physical exhaustion. Then the experienced gamer began his explorations, sensed the presence of slime, and smelled the soil on the field. Gradually Soma began to get used to and believe in the reality of this world. The fact that he found himself in this strange place looked like a real fantasy, but still somehow he was able to incarnate in the computer game, and now it is necessary to apply all his knowledge. Watching the sun sink very far below the horizon, reminding him that night would soon come, Soma continued to think on how he would survive in the new reality. Periodically, the silence and beauty of nature was broken only by a rumbling in his stomach, reminding him of hunger. Eventually Soma decided that the whole story was actually very simple, whether it was a game or reality, and that was the only difference. The experienced gamer realized that he needed to stay here and continue to play Borderlord to the fullest, for that was exactly what he wished for the moment he picked up the joystick. A new life lay ahead of the experienced gamer the moment he felt incredibly tired and decided to get a good night's sleep. Taking a strong wooden stick in his hands, he carefully drew a circle around his dwelling about 30 meters in diameter and looked at the result of his labors. The fact was that Soma woke up early in the morning and decided to immediately draw the boundary of his territory. But at this time, he noticed that when he went beyond this territory, he had a strange feeling as if some monsters might appear there, and perhaps it was the Borderlord's special ability. Soma decided to take a closer look at his current status and immediately noticed that the numbers of the agriculture and industry skill had increased due to his actions of repairing the hut and growing vegetables. Physical strength was 10 units with a maximum of 100 units. At the same time, there was an opportunity to improve the trade skill, but it was necessary to meet people to do so. Looking high in the sky, the skilled gamer decided to find out today what exactly was around his territory, and the most convenient method of orientation was to follow the sun. After applying his orienteering skills, the experienced gamer found out that the side of the hut where the front door is located is the north side. The rather vast forest that was located in the west of Soma's territory, where yesterday he managed to find a significant amount of wandering slime, the guy immediately nicknamed the Forest of Slime and decided for himself that later it would be necessary to thoroughly explore this area. But to start the experience, the gamer decided to head north. The guy decided to head straight ahead, pushing off from the front door of the hut, and thought that if he could find traces of human movement, it would be a huge step in exploring this world. But after traveling a considerable distance from his dwelling, Soma was still unable to find anything similar that could tell him about the locals. The only thing Soma saw in front of him were various animals. The animals looked quite dangerous and immediately sensed the approach of a normal human. Soma decided not to take any unnecessary risks, for it was obvious that this passage was closed to him at the moment. After that, the experienced gamer returned back to his hut and decided to head further to the eastern side. It was in the eastern side, there was a river, so there was a chance that something interesting could be found there. As he approached the clear water, Soma heard strange splashes and a sense of curiosity insisted on finding out the source of the sound. As it turned out, there were plenty of fish in the river, which was great news for a man who had been starving for a long time. Soma decided to catch fish by all means and make himself happy with a tasty meal. Also, the water in the river was incredibly clear and very pleasant to taste. Because the water was cool, the experienced gamer surmised that this river might have originated somewhere high in the mountains. Thanks to this discovery, it was obvious that there would be no more problems with clean drinking water, and all that remained was to catch a fast fish, which clearly did not want to become food for humans. Soma took off his shoes and entered the water and decided to show his agility. The fish was at first sight slow and huge, and Soma believed in his abilities and carefully aimed for a confident strike. But it all turned out to be an illusion. As soon as the guy swung the spear, the large fish showed incredible speed and quickly left the target area. Swearing at the fish, the experienced gamer decided to repeat his attempt, because to stay hungry absolutely did not want to. Soma continued his fruitless attempts to catch the nimble fish, but all this only served to tire the experienced gamer. During such extreme fishing only intensified many times, and Soma desperately waved his spear, cursing the dodgy fish. Having spent the rest of physical strength, tired fisherman lay down on the bank of the river and began to breathe heavily. The fish, meanwhile, remained calmly swimming in the water, which gradually became transparent again. Taking another look at his spear, which was completely unsuitable for catching fish, Soma whispered quietly that it was vital for him to make a fishing rod or some kind of net. But then suddenly someone's shadow loomed over the lad, and an unfamiliar voice asked why he was lying here in the blazing sun. The experienced gamer immediately became wary and asked the stranger what such a thing was and why it was creeping up so suddenly. The man was a little embarrassed at such an accusation and apologized, and then explained that he had not meant to frighten anyone. The man politely took off his cap and explained that his name was Bin and he runs a humble trading company in the capital of the kingdom. Simply put, he is a merchant who wishes no harm to anyone. Soma was surprised to learn that this lonely man was just a foolish merchant and advised Bin to be much more careful in the future when he talks to strangers so carelessly. But the adult merchant laughed in response and explained that he would never be cautious of a man who was trying to catch a dodgy fish with an ordinary stone spear. Soma immediately felt his face flush red with shame and realized that Bin had seen the process of his foolish fishing. But then suddenly, another man appeared from the depths of the forest and informed the jolly trader that the break was over and added that there was no point in lingering in such a wilderness. The experienced gamer asked Bin where exactly they were going, for this was the first person he had met in the fantasy world. The merchant explained that he was merely returning from a long shopping trip to a neighboring town. The news of a city that was somewhere very close by had caused a storm of emotion in Soma, and the guy decided that it was urgent to figure out how to take advantage of such information. Meanwhile, an enterprising merchant offered the young hermit a look at his wares since their meeting was so unplanned. Bin boasted that he always had a good selection of the finest goods and that everyone would find something of interest. To begin with, the shrewd merchant displayed a mithril sword and proudly declared that it was the best item made from the famous metal. Soma quickly used his analysis function and found out that this blade was of quite high quality and could deal 99 damage. And to create such a weapon, 100 units of grade A magic stone was required. Also, this weapon added 15 units of strength to the wielder. But then Soma found out that this blade was badly worn out and was in a critical condition. Therefore, there is a high probability that the mithril sword will break after a few uses, because the gamer decided that since this merchant allows himself to sell such weapons, then he in no way cannot be trusted. After all, only scammers try to slip some tainted goods and profit from gullible people. But still, for interest, Soma inquired about the cost of this blade. Bin made the most benevolent smile, said that as a token of future friendship, he can give this magnificent blade just half the usual price, which is 10 gold coins. Such an answer was outrageous, and the lad declared that the merchant was underestimating him too much. After all, he would never pay that much money for such a ruined weapon in his life. Bin's face instantly showed fear and surprise, and the merchant stammered that he didn't understand why he had offended Soma so much. The guy stated that this blade was broken, and so Bin was acting like a real crook who wanted to sell a useless thing for a lot of money. The merchant exclaimed that he would never do such a thing to people, for it would ruin his reputation as an honest merchant. Bin then asked his assistant to test the mithril blade and swing it several times. The warrior girl did not immediately realize what was wanted from her, but she took the mithril blade and swung it forcefully. But as soon as the sharp blade of the sword just made contact with the ordinary stone, the seemingly super strong mithril steel shattered like ordinary glass. The astonished merchant Bin crumbled to his knees in brokenness and muttered that the blade was indeed in a terrible state. At this point, it was not entirely clear whether the merchant was truly distressed by this news or whether he was actually a fine actor. Bin then asked Soma how he was able to find out about the condition of the mithril blade. But the incredulous gamer thought that whether the merchant wanted to convince him that he was completely unaware of the extent of damage to his own goods, for that is silly. The merchant then began to empty his huge rucksack very quickly and asked Soma if he had any special skills in evaluating items. Bin explained that for him, the quality of the goods was of great importance, and so it would be very helpful if Soma could look at all of his goods and give his opinion. The merchant, accustomed to commercial relations, promised Soma to be sure to pay for such a favor, for any work should be rewarded. The experienced gamer thought that apparently Bin really can't recognize the condition of his goods. Although the degree of damage to goods is very valuable information for any merchant, Soma figured that this businessman would be very eager to use his ability to analyze, and perhaps Bin would even beg him. Soma decided to take advantage of the situation and asked the merchant to do him some kind of favor. Willing to do anything to maintain his reputation as a merchant, Bin immediately promised to help. The young gamer explained that his territory was not far from this place, but it was still too small at the moment and he was completely short of men. Soma asked if the merchant would be able to recruit all comers to work on his estate. The merchant asked in surprise if that was all Soma wanted to ask. But the guy quickly orientated himself and decided to continue the conversation. The resourceful gamer complained about the lack of a regular shop in his estate. Soma asked his new merchant acquaintance to visit his estates and trade from time to time, and in return he would inspect all his goods for damage and give an absolutely accurate appraisal. But at the same time, the resourceful gamer did not forget to ask for a generous discount, in case he wants to buy himself something. Merchant Bin agreed without a second thought to visit Soma's estate on a trade mission. To confirm their promises, the two companions shook hands, thus finalizing their cooperation in the future. After that, Bin asked the fellow to get busy evaluating the rest of the goods, as he was eager to find out what he would just have to throw away. After chatting with the merchant, Soma checked his stats and found out that his trading ability score had increased to 9 units and there was only 1 unit left to reach the next level. The experienced gamer of course realized that this was due to the negotiation with the merchant, and it would be useful to further develop this skill. After that, Soma decided to go to his field and check the availability of the harvest. Since the last visit it had been a whole day and the guy hoped to find some vegetables, because the feeling of hunger refused to leave the young body. The young farmer's expectations were fully justified, for he immediately found a new crop in the form of a cucumber and a tomato, and it was a real success. With a feeling of superiority, Soma examined the grown vegetables and praised himself for this result and decided that for the next harvest he would have to wait 1 more day. The novice farmer then thought that it would be a good idea to improve his level of farming. After all, he would have to provide his own food. Especially if he could get people to work on his estate, he would not have enough food to feed his workers as well. Soma prioritized rebuilding the hut and cultivating the field. And perhaps through his efforts and hard work it will be possible to expand his territory and ensure the stable cultivation of food. The only thing the experienced gamer did not want to do was to fight slugs again, because it took too much time and effort. But at this point, there was no other option but to take care of this unpleasant task himself. Soma pulled himself together and armed himself with a stone spear and went in search of slugs. This time the fight was much more effective, because now Soma already felt confident in his abilities and quickly enough cleared the area of nasty slugs. After that the boy planted new vegetable seedlings and caught himself thinking that he liked this job. The new beds looked promising, but all he had to do was water them on time and wait for the next harvest. The border lord then set about repairing his dilapidated hut. This activity was much more difficult than cultivating the field, and Soma gently hit himself with a hammer on his finger, then uttered a phrase that children are better not to hear. The necessary material ran out quickly, and so Soma went to the forest again to get a new batch of wood and constantly felt the presence of slugs, which usually hid in the grass and waited for an opportune moment to attack. It was indeed a lot of work for one man, but despite being very tired, Soma enjoyed the process and especially the results of his work. The border lord had finally managed to restore the water supply and could now take a bath in peace, and the fresh vegetables were pleasing in their flavor and had finally removed hunger. After 10 days of continuous labor, Soma had created a handy walking stick for himself, which was much easier to handle than a spear. At this point the area looked much better, the hut looked like a renovated building, and the fields had greatly expanded and were rejoicing in the harvest. Soma was also able to upgrade his industry skill to level 2. Thanks to the improved blacksmith skill, it was now possible to produce crystal wands instead of the usual wooden sticks. At the same time, the hut now gained additional abilities and changed its name to Old House in the status window. The border lord's dwelling gained the ability to signaling as well as water supply and was already livable, although it required additional repairs. The farming skill level was still first but had already reached 7 units, and in addition to cucumbers and tomatoes, Soma was now harvesting cabbages. The variety of food pleased the guy and the number of vegetables gradually increased. On another morning Soma decided to work even harder, but a familiar voice prevented him from doing his usual chores. As promised, the merchant Bin appeared and apologized for the delay and explained that he had managed to find the necessary workers for Soma. The merchant brought with him a small girl and proudly declared that this lady was ready to become a resident of his lands and help with the improvement of the territory. The young blonde girl timidly announced that her name was Crush and she was pleased to meet Mr. Soma. The girl explained that she came across an advert for a job and immediately decided to respond to it. The border lord was pleased to meet a new person and explained to the girl that he owned the land and promised mutually beneficial cooperation. The girl cautiously shook hands with her new master, and at that moment Soma's natural suspiciousness reminded himself again. The guy couldn't understand why such a nice girl would want to live in a territory with only one man. And perhaps this is some kind of cunning trap and the girls could be a decoy or a scout. One could imagine that Merchant Bing had specifically asked this girl to come here to unravel his secret. How exactly does he manage to check the damage on various items? Doubts did not leave the young border lord, but Soma calmed his paranoia. After all, it could be that he was just winding himself up. But then unexpectedly Soma could see this girl's status, that her occupation was a maid and she had useful skills in fishing, gathering and holy magic. The ability scores weren't too advanced, which made Crush not much suited for a lonely life, but she could be a good helper. The border lord then decided to check the status of the merchant, but unfortunately nothing came up. Soma decided that it was likely that this feature only worked on people who wanted to live in his territory and were his employees. Soma asked the girl if he could ask her something. Crush looked completely friendly and naive and showed a willingness to answer any questions. The border lord, trying to be as serious as possible, asked why Crush had actually decided to come to his lands. The pretty blonde explained that she was working as a maid, but such work did not give her an easy time and eventually she made an unforgivable mistake at work and then she was fired. Then as it turned out, Crush changed many other jobs, but unfortunately the situation kept repeating itself and she was fired very quickly. The blonde explained that one day she found herself on the street with no money and suddenly saw a new job advert. It was at that moment that she thought that if she was destined to starve to death, she would rather accept a job in some remote place. Soma immediately lowered the degree of suspicion, for such a story was very much like the truth and now one could believe such low characteristics of this clumsy girl. The border lord stated that he certainly understood the difficult situation Crush was in and explained that as she had already been able to notice, he lived in this territory alone and it was necessary to develop it. Soma then explained that he could not help with money at the moment but that Crush should try to work and try her best. And if she agrees, they can achieve results and get a little rich in the future. The cute blonde replied without hesitation that she agreed to such conditions and if there is a job she can do, she is ready to take it. The border lord praised the girl for her optimistic attitude and thanked the merchant for the new employee. Soma then escorted Crush into his dwelling and offered to take one of the rooms, but explained that unfortunately he had almost no furniture. But the joyful blonde was not at all embarrassed by such Spartan conditions and thanked for the room. Soma then showed his possessions and explained that this area is practically empty and therefore you should try to bring this area to an acceptable level as soon as possible. The experienced gamer admitted that alone, there was no way he could do this task and so he needed helpers. The blonde replied that she understood and if there was anything she could do to help in this matter, all she had to do was just tell her and she would do her best. Soma liked the eagerness and enthusiasm of the young assistant and for a start he offered Crush to take over his garden, where it was necessary to keep an eye on the vegetables and water the bushes in a timely manner. The girl gladly accepted the job, but explained that she was actually new to agriculture, but would try her best. But as it turned out, aspiration does not mean skill, and having made a few steps, inattentive blonde caught on a stone. The fall was spectacular, and not only the young blonde, but also some of the plants. The stems of the cucumbers were broken, and the beautiful juicy cabbage was savagely crushed. The border lord rushed to help the girl and asked if she was all right. But the young helper was upset and crying, for once again she had demonstrated her clumsiness. A worried Crush realized that she had trampled on the ripe tomatoes and destroyed the cabbage and began to cry and apologize for her sloppiness. Soma was of course saddened by the loss of the vegetables, but still tried to calm the girl down and explain that there was nothing wrong with it. The border lord explained to the girl that what she had done was not on purpose and there was no need to be upset. Crush was desperate and asked if Soma really wasn't mad at her. And then the blonde suddenly asked her not to hit her and it caused a real shock to Soma. He didn't even have any thoughts that he could hit this lovely creature and now he was scared to imagine what kind of places this girl used to work in before. Crush thanked her master for his leniency. And Soma asked the girl to pick the vegetables and take them home so they could have lunch afterwards. The blonde girl promised to do everything and bowed to the guy. But a few minutes later the same thing happened that had happened in the vegetable garden. Carelessly the blonde again tripped over a stone and made no less spectacular flight than last time, and the vegetables flew in different directions. Crush cried again and began to apologize for her action. This time, the Border Lord just kept silent, for it was very difficult to comment on everything that was happening in any way. The Border Lord realized that if Crush continued to make such mistakes, it was unlikely that she would ever be able to continue her career as a maid, nor would she ever be able to work anywhere. After the blonde did pick the vegetables and carry them into the house, she asked if she could do any more work. Soma remembered that the girl had a gathering ability of a fairly high level. But judging by Crush's behavior, she had absolutely nothing to do with farming. The Border Lord then asked the blonde girl if she had ever engaged in gathering. Crush thought for a while and said that when she had no money, she had to look for grass in grassy places to at least get some food. Soma decided to put that skill to use and asked if Crush knew any edible grass in the area. The blonde girl hesitated, trying to remember exactly what kind of herb she had to eat. The girl then quickly looked around the area and found a few stalks of a D-grade medicinal herb that was commonly used by the local alchemists. The Border Lord was delighted with this find, because when he had explored the area on his own, he had never found anything like this. And a D-grade medicinal herb could be worth good money. Soma decided that it was likely that Crush was able to discover a useful herb through her gathering skills, which meant that this clumsy girl wasn't completely hopeless. Soma then asked the girl to look for more such a medicinal herb, and Crush happily rushed to look for it. After spending only a few minutes, the blonde girl was able to find a few more medicinal plants and gave them to her master. The plant turned out to be exactly the same as the last one and belonged to D-class medicinal herbs. Soma decided that his assumption was confirmed and realized that if a person's skill was above a certain level, then the level of what he could find would not be less than that level. The Border Lord then decided to still use his assistant's skills and asked Crush to find a good branch. The blonde girl happily agreed and went on a search. And Soma decided that if the girl's skill really worked on tree branches and other materials, it would be possible to obtain D-grade wood. But soon the girl came back and provided a Class E branch, and the Border Lord realized that this was not what he had hoped for. The blonde girl started up again and apologized for not being able to help. Soma tried to calm the girl down, but Crush stated that she couldn't be pitied and should just be fired. But the young landowner stated that he was not going to do that, for he needed Crush as a helper. The blonde girl was immediately silent and surprised, for she had never heard such a thing before. Soma explained that he needed Crush to improve his property. The girl immediately blushed and surrendered Soma's hand heavily. Crush confessed that she had never heard such good words in her life and promised to do everything in her power to help her master. Soma thanked the blonde for her willingness to help and asked her to gather more medicinal herbs as much as she could. Crush promised to do her best and ran off to find some. The Border Lord decided that Crush had really taken this assignment seriously. And it seems the girl who had been fired many times no longer wanted to lose another job. The Border Lord was glad that with the help of the diligent blonde, he would be able to do much more than he could do alone. And when Crush gathered enough medicinal plants, it would be possible to learn alchemy and try to create expensive potions. Well, for now, Soma decided to continue collecting magic stones and then test some of his assumptions. The Border Lord decided to find out if his assistant could level up using his territory. If it was indeed possible, having raised the level of the territory, it would be curious to see exactly how it would affect Tension Crush. Soma also decided not to forget about his skills that he could now use. And so one should try out the inspiration and growth skills as soon as possible. Gradually, the young landowner realized how wonderful it was to have extra working hands. After walking through the forest, Soma decided to go back to his vegetable garden and check the cabbage harvest. The boy also wanted to ask the girl about her fishing skills, for he really wanted to catch the cheeky fish that were abundant in the local river. Back to his dwelling, Soma inquired about collecting medicinal plants and was incredibly surprised to find a huge pile of useful and rare herbs. However, Crush was nowhere to be seen on the grounds, and it seemed strange. After all, this modest blonde couldn't have escaped so easily. After walking around his house for a few minutes, the Border Lord became worried and decided to call out to the girl. Contrary to expectations, the girl's voice came in response, but it sounded very strangely muffled. And then from the pile of medicinal herbs, the blonde girl's legs appeared, and Crush asked to help her get out, because she was very heavy from the weight of the plants. The Border Lord rushed to the rescue and freed his strange helper. Crush was very excited and cried as usual, and then began to thank Soma for saving her. Through her tears, the blonde explained that the guy had saved her black doom. The experienced gamer asked her not to exaggerate, to calm down, and then explain what had happened to her in the first place. Crush explained that she was in a great hurry when she was carrying the herbs, and then she tripped and fell, and it so happened that she was crushed by the medicinal plants. The Border Lord was not even surprised by this explanation and praised the girl for the huge amount of herbs she had collected. Using his analysis skill, Soma figured out that there were 271 specimens of medicinal herbs in front of him, and it was an excellent result. The experienced gamer then found out that he could prepare an excellent recovery potion using 10 medicinal herbs. And if he tried hard enough, he could make enough potions that he could later sell to the merchant bin and earn good money. This time Soma could feel like a real alchemist, for in front of him was a real alchemical kit of all sorts of laboratory supplies. Crush examined the items with interest and couldn't believe that they came from crystal. The blonde excitedly asked how it even worked, because it was incredible. The Border Lord hesitated to explain and then stated that he didn't know how to say exactly, but it was something like his personal magic. The blonde was delighted and called Soma a powerful man. Then the novice alchemist looked at the obscure alchemical containers and realized that he didn't have a very good ability, because he didn't understand how to mix the various ingredients to make a good potion. In this case, the time for alchemical manipulation was given only 5 minutes. And apparently the attempts were also limited to a few per day. But suddenly, the young assistant deftly picked up various flasks and began to perform alchemical actions. Soma asked what she was doing, and Crush explained that she was just trying to mix the ingredients, for that was what needed to be done. The blonde stated that she wanted to help prepare a medicinal potion. The landowner wanted to object, but the girl was so engrossed in the process that it was too late. Crush declared that there was no need to worry about anything and promised that she would definitely succeed. After some unknown manipulation, Crush excitedly exclaimed that the resulting substance was beginning to glow. Soma's natural paranoia suggested that all this was dangerous, and the guy hurriedly threw away the alchemical container and then pushed the blonde away. His premonition did not fail the Border Lord, because 10 meters away from them, exactly where the container of liquid fell, there was a strong explosion. The explosion was so strong that Crush and Soma felt the extreme heat even at this distance. At this moment, the Border Lord realized how dangerous alchemy could be. The frightened blonde box asked what had just happened in the first place. Soma decided that he had never heard a dumber question in his life, but still held back his emotions and explained to the girl that she had somehow managed to cook a real bomb that exploded, and it was good that they had managed to throw it away. Soma thanked Crush for her incredible skills in alchemy, but since it was so dangerous, he decided to continue on his own. But the flustered blonde warned her master of the danger, for he too knew nothing about this complicated business. Soma explained that in any case, he as the owner of this territory, cannot expose his assistant to mortal danger. After all, she is his only employee and she must be valued. Crush liked this explanation and she did not argue anymore, and Soma in turn felt calmer. If this girl will not make alchemical mixtures again. The young landowner then asked if the girl could make a fishing rod or something else for fishing, since there was a river nearby and one could catch fish. Crush thought for a moment and then confidently declared that if she had a good wooden stick and a strong line and a sharp hook, she would certainly make a good fishing rod. After a while, the girl carefully her stuff and cheerfully announced that she had all the necessary components with her and she would try to do the right thing. Crush asked her master if he had tried fishing himself. Soma did not reveal all the details of his unsuccessful fishing trip, but only explained that he had noticed a large number of fish in the local river and it would be nice to diversify his diet. The overjoyed blonde promised to take up fishing and was confident that he could catch lots of fish. The Border Lord was pleased at the girl's eagerness to help and remembered that Crush had fishing skills present, so this occupation looked more promising for the blonde than for him. But then Soma asked the girl to postpone fishing until tomorrow, because it would be dark soon and there was no need to be far from home in the dark. Crush heeded her master's words and did not argue. Then the experienced gamer explained that he still had something important to do and so the girl should go back home and wait for him. Crush agreed and decided to get busy unpacking her things. Left alone and in silence, Soma once again decided to get back to his alchemical work and realized that the main problem was figuring out exactly how to mix the liquid correctly. After all, it was most likely that what had happened and the explosion was the reason why the girl had mixed everything together and had absolutely no control over the proportions. Soma cautiously began to mix different elements using small amounts, but unfortunately nothing worked and several times again there was an explosion, but on a much smaller scale. The Border Lord decided not to stop and continued his alchemical experiments, although he was already feeling irritable. Soma told himself that he would not let failure spoil his development and decided that the more complex the mixture, the better it would be. After all, if it's more difficult, the more fun and interesting it becomes. After some time, when the whole sky was already dotted with stars, the young Earth owner still managed to create a potion of recovery D class, which judging by the description perfectly healed wounds. This made Soma really excited, for all his efforts had succeeded. The girl who came running to the shout congratulated Soma on the positive result. And the guy wondered if Crush had been watching him the whole time. The blonde girl explained that she had been hearing sounds the whole time and eating was getting curiouser and curiouser. Soma explained to Crush that thanks to her, they were still able to create the recovery potion. The blonde was embarrassed and reminded that she was the reason why the alchemical mixture only exploded and the main work was done by the Lord himself. The Border Lord explained to the girl that Crush had actually prepared the foundation for his work, because without her, he wouldn't have been able to gather medicinal plants. The large number of medicinal plants made it possible to make so many failed attempts. The girl was happy at these words and instantly blushed and then clarified whether she correctly understood that she had succeeded together with the master. Soma replied that that was exactly what happened and they were able to do an important job together that couldn't be done alone. Judging by the blonde's reaction, she was happy about it, because she was already used to her. Crush then promised to do her best in the future to help with the beautification of the host's property. Soma once again reminded that he would count on the girl. After a few days of working together, Soma's estate was gradually improving and Crush indicated that they were ready to meet. Crush has greatly improved her skills and settled into her new job during this time and has even been able to cook a lovely breakfast. But no matter how hard the cute blonde tried, she still sometimes showed carelessness and immediately apologized that the fish was a bit burnt. But Soma was not upset and especially did not want to upset his assistant, so he habitually said that he did not see anything wrong with it. Some minor mistakes Crush showed due to nervousness, but the Border Lord was not worried and watched the girl gradually adapt and become much calmer. In the process of working together, the territory was also improved in the same way. In such a short period of time, the skills of industry and agriculture had reached a booming stage. Through experiments in alchemy, Soma was able to find out the pattern that if one used rarer and more expensive materials, the performance would increase significantly. While cooking, Crush asked to find her salt and some other seasonings, because that would make the dishes taste much better. The Border Lord promised to be sure to ask about these goods from Merchant Bin the next time he came to visit. The pretty blonde also confessed that she would like to have new people here as soon as possible, because it was too lonely for two people. Soma thought about it and agreed with the girl, because it was wonderful to expand his staff. The Border Lord then decided that he needed to strengthen his own forces first, for it was not safe to take Crush with him yet. Soon, as usual, the Merchant Bin came to visit and Soma welcomed his good companion. The merchant this time asked the Border Lord to evaluate the weapons. And also Bin informed him that he had not arrived alone and he had someone to introduce. Soma was surprised when he saw a beautiful brunette girl. Apparently, she belonged to the Beastmen race because she had cat ears and a tail. The girl introduced herself as Layla, and Soma thought that a group of girls was good, but he would like to get a guy on his team. Merchant Bin explained that Layla wasn't too talkative, but as far as he knew this girl had a self-proclaimed C rank. That being said, it is reliably known that Layla has incredible strength and that would be useful. Soma didn't have too much faith in the cat girl's rank since it turned out to be self-proclaimed. But then the Border Lord noticed the dagger and pouch in Layla's possession and realized that she definitely had the equipment of an adventurer. Soma smiled as welcomingly as possible and introduced himself and Crush, and then politely extended his hand to Layla. But the girl was wary of such a gesture. And then Layla chagrined to say how she could ever have come to such shame since she was in such a backwater. Such a mood of the girl did not like Soma, and it was not clear why this girl was even here. The experienced gamer then decided to check the girl's status since she had indeed become part of his territory. But to Soma's surprise, nothing worked and the magical crystal did not react at all to Layla. Soma could not understand how this was possible. After all, he was the lord of these lands, and moreover with Crush the analysis was successful. The Border Lord thought that this strange girl could have pretended to enter his territory on purpose, because that was the only way to explain the lack of analysis. Soma thought about the fact that perhaps this girl was a real brigand hired by someone. Although if that was really the case, Layla probably wouldn't have come so brazenly into his territory. But in any case, it was quite clear, this mysterious girl has completely different goals. And there must be some condition present for the magic crystal to recognize Layla as a member of the territory and need to find out as soon as possible. Then the Border Lord offered to show the cat girl her new room. But to Soma's surprise, Layla refused the room and explained that she would make a suitable place for herself. Crush was delighted with the new team member and wondered if Layla could build a real house on her own. But the cat girl answered that it was not so and even a simple tent would be enough for her. The main thing was that it could save her from wind and rain. Caring Blonde immediately objected that such conditions are not enough at all, because Layla will take a bath and it is better to live in a normal house, because it is much more comfortable. But Layla exclaimed irritably that she didn't need any bathroom. Crush decided not to give up and started to argue with her new acquaintance, trying to prove emotionally that taking a bath was very important and if she wanted to they could do it together. At such words, Layla was horrified, for she had never heard such a thing. But in any case, the persistence of the former maid could not be underestimated, and Crush quickly took the situation into her own hands, pulling Layla behind her. The cat girl tried to resist and explain that she had never in her life taken a bath with someone together, but it was all to no avail. Soma was surprised by this situation and couldn't understand where the fragile blonde girl got such strength from. Meanwhile, Merchant Bin chuckled quietly and said that Soma was gradually getting used to such noisy company. The Border Lord of course agreed to follow the standard procedure for assessing the quality of the weapon, but in turn asked the merchant to fulfill one request. Soma explained that he needed seasoning as well as regular kitchen salt, as the food was not tasting as good. The trader was not surprised at all and headed towards his cart. Bean explained that he had anticipated this request in advance and had therefore specially prepared excellent seasonings for the young landowner. A few minutes later, the thoughtful merchant displayed a variety of different seasonings, among which were, of course, the standard salt, sugar, and pepper. Bin explained to Soma that he had prepared a full set of the most commonly used spices and it should last for a long time. The boy was delighted at his friend's insight and thanked him for his help. The merchant then explained that these were all the spices he had and so one large silver coin should suffice. But the border lord replied that he had absolutely no money at hand at the moment. Soma then took out a vial of his recovery potion from his pocket and then explained that he expected to sell the item and would like to know how much he could get for such a potion. With an experienced eye, the merchant evaluated the potion and gave it a D grade. Soma was surprised at such an accurate evaluation and asked if a casual glance was enough to determine the quality of the potion. Bean boasted that usually merchants have a sharp eye and can determine the quality at a glance. Soma thought that apparently he wasn't the only one who had the ability to judge things as a lord and asked the merchant how much such a recovery potion could cost. Bin said that since this medicine was of rank D, it was safe to say that each vial could be exchanged for one silver coin. The border lord thought for a moment, for he had absolutely no understanding of the currency of this world and did not know how different an ordinary silver coin was from a large silver coin. Soma then stated that he had 4 bottles of revitalizing agent and would like to sell 3 of them, but doubted whether it would be enough. The merchant replied that in that case they could help each other and stated that he just now had a lot of weapons that needed appraisal. Bin stated that he would gladly pay 1 silver coin to cover the cost of appraising the weapons. Soma thanked him for this courtesy and asked the merchant if he was sure of his decision. At this, the young landowner reminded the trader that they already had an agreement in place that involved settlers in exchange for the valuation of goods. Bean agreed, but also said he was always happy to help Soma. After finishing his business as a merchant and saying goodbye, Soma returned home with a supply of spices and turned his attention to his new assistant who was just sitting at the table. As it turned out, Layla was too tired from her interaction with Crush. Soma explained to the cat girl that he was the only lord in the territory and felt that Layla should have realized exactly where she had come. But the frustrated brunette replied that she probably had the wrong clearing, and this elicited a laugh from Soma. The border lord then inquired as to the purpose for which Layla had come to him. The girl explained that it was actually very simple and she had decided to see if there were any interesting jobs here. But such an answer seemed strange, and Soma reminded the girl of her own words when she complained about her job. And so she must have some other purpose. Layla thought for a moment, and then without finding any explanation said that she had never said such a thing at all and that Soma must have invented it all by himself. Meanwhile, in the night city of Cheville, a high-ranking my lord was scrutinizing a map of the territories. My lord inquired about the possibility of creating another fiefdom in his territory. An obliging aide favored the idea and asked permission to give his opinion. My lord's aide reported that he had instructed the explorer to look into the matter in advance. And in just a few days she would be able to find out the cause and strength of the enemy. The aide expressed confidence that Layla would definitely be able to find out everything. My lord thought about the girl's candidacy and replied that she was quite a worthy researcher and unlikely to switch sides. the assistant explained that there was absolutely no need to worry, because he had prepared a great reward for Layla and showed her a map that would help her find the legendary ore that this girl had been trying to find for a very long time. But of course this map is just a good fake. My lord laughed and praised his assistant for his cunning and resourcefulness. And then said that when the information was confirmed, he would definitely make the young unknown lord regret his decision. The next day early in the morning, Soma went fishing with his beautiful helpers. Layla did not want to go, but no one asked her. Crush explained to the cat girl that fishing is a very important activity, because the fish caught in the river is very tasty and nutritious. Layla then stated that if everyone insisted, of course, she could help in this endeavor, although she was not interested at all. The border lord of course realized that it was only a bluff, for in fact Layla wanted fresh fish and her tale strongly gives away her real mood. Trying to keep quiet, everyone watched the float with interest. The blonde was waiting for the right moment to pull out the fish, and suddenly the float showed movement. But it was just a false reaction caused by a splash of water. Layla asked Crush if she was sure that her rod would really bring results. The blonde was confident and stated that she was sure to catch lots of fish. Layla then asked her to give it a try, and Crush replied that it was possible to make a second rod, as she had a spare line and hook and just needed to get a wooden stick. Soma decided to help and provided the girl with a suitable stick. The young blonde carefully began to construct a new fishing rod and explained that the most important thing was to tie the fishing line to the hook firmly so that the fish could not break off. After a few minutes, a rag fishing rod was created, which as it turned out belonged to the E-rank weapon class and strengthened muscles by 1 unit. The border lord was satisfied with Crush's ability to create a good fishing rod, because if the quality of this tool could be improved in the future, it would be possible to catch some good fish. Behind him there was a rustle of leaves, and as usual a familiar slug jumped out. Soma immediately thought that with the help of this creature can improve the quality of the rod, and it remains only to destroy the slug. The first to react to the presence of the monster was Layla. The cat girl, with lightning-fast movements of her sharp blade, chopped the slug into 2 parts and showed her fighting skills. The border lord watched in amazement as the magic stone fell to the ground, and then praised the cat girl for her incredibly cool destruction of the slug. But Layla, trying to hide her embarrassment, exclaimed that there was nothing cool about it, as she had destroyed an ordinary harmless little monster. But Soma explained that if he had fought the slug himself, it would have taken at least tens of minutes. Layla exclaimed that this was quite normal, because Soma was not a fighter at all and was apparently very stupid for not realizing this. Catgirl irritably explained that Soma was a lord and he should always be in the back cheering up his subordinates. Soma agreed that he really should act differently and admitted that he didn't have the necessary combat skills. Layla explained that she didn't need anyone's support, and especially not the lord's, as she was used to fighting alone. This emotional form of Layla's communication began to amuse Soma, and he decided that in this way the girl was trying to appear more independent. At that, the young landowner thought that he would really like to try out his inspiration skill, but apparently it is an ability that only works on Crush. The young blonde stated that she too wanted to learn how to fight as cool as Layla, but the cat girl reminded Crush that she was not a fighter and unlikely to be able to do that. Then, examining his status, Soma realized that his inspiration skill had been activated all this time, yet he didn't feel it had any effect, and perhaps it was due to the battle ending too quickly. The border lord thought about how he could best use the skill, but at that moment Layla indignantly reminded him about fishing and called Soma to come along. But the experienced gamer asked not to rush him, for he had something important to do. The guy asked if Layla does not need a magic stone received from the killed slug. But the cat girl said that a magic stone of that size was completely worthless and she could safely give it to Soma. The young landowner did not refuse such an offer and immediately decided to use the magic stone to improve his fishing rod. Layla asked in surprise what Soma had just done with the fishing rod. Crush hurriedly explained that the gentleman had special skills and could improve various items. But the cat girl declared that it couldn't be a question and there must be some clever trick here. Border Lord explained that the blonde girl was really telling the truth and he actually had magic power. Layla calmed down a bit and admitted that she didn't understand everything that was going on. Soma said that because he is a lord he can improve the quality of items if he has certain materials to do so. And this time he needed a magic stone through which he was able to improve the quality of the fishing rod. Layla looked very excited and exclaimed that she had never heard of anything like this. The strange brunette thought for a moment and then quietly said that perhaps this ability extended to medicines. The young landowner remembered that the recovery potion had specified the necessary material to improve. And then the fellow explained that he hadn't actually tried it yet, but it was quite possible to improve the medicine. At that, Soma noticed how interested the girl was in the cure and perhaps she had some problem she wanted to solve. And if that was indeed the case, it would help to gain the trust of this mysterious cat girl. Soma asked Layla if he understood correctly that she had some medicine that she wanted to improve. But Layla irritatedly asked why she should tell her problems. But Soma explained that there was nothing wrong with trying to help each other if there was an opportunity. And if Layla wants to be part of his team and live in his territory, then we need to trust each other and help each other. Also, he as the lord of these lands should do what he can for his people. These words made Layla think, for the girl had not expected a stranger to want to help her at all. The girl cat thoughtfully looked at the float of the fishing rod and tried to comprehend Soma's words. After all, in fact, she only wanted to earn money and so she agreed to the task. Layla's secret assignment was to sell important information about Soma. And now realizing how noble this man is absolutely does not want to get him into trouble. An unexpected splash of water drew Layla away from her musings and the girl noticed the float quickly sinking into the water. Crush immediately noticed the movement of the float and asked Layla what progress she was making. But the girl cat was confused at this point and did not know what to do. But then Layla got her thoughts together and exclaimed that she should just pull the rod towards herself. But suddenly the mysterious brunette stumbled on a slippery rock and lost her balance. A second later, Layla was lying in the cool river water trying to figure out how it happened. The caring blonde asked if Layla was all right. The cat girl apologized for her oversight, for she had let the fish get away. But Crush stated that Lilia should try again and then she would definitely catch the fish. At this, the blonde offered her help and extended her hand to Lilia. But at that moment what was about to happen happened. For despite her care and sincere desire to help, Crush was still the clumsy girl she was and so she collapsed into the water next to the brunette. This time already Layla helped her new friend up out of the water. But despite such a silly fall, Crush was pleased and declared that today is a beautiful day. The blonde complained about her soaked clothes and advised Layla to take them off. But such behavior was outrageous for the brunette and she of course refused to undress and moreover prevented Crush from doing so. Layla exclaimed that you can't undress in the presence of a man. Crush didn't understand at all why she would worry about that and it angered Layla. The brunette then stated that she could use fire magic and so her clothes would dry instantly. Crush thanked her new friend, but then they both realized that if they moved too fast they would lose their balance. A few minutes later Layla fell again and the overjoyed blonde apologized for her awkwardness. The border lord watching the girls was pleased that they were actually having fun. In the end, they still managed to catch a few small fish and Soma quickly built a fire. The fried fish was incredibly tasty and this kind of relaxation by the fire created a feeling of friendship. The girls discussed ways of cooking fish and Crush confessed that she was very surprised how Layla perfectly grilled the fish. The blonde explained that she had watched the grilling process closely and cooks a little differently herself. After a wonderful lunch, Crush got busy cleaning up and headed home. Left alone with the lord of these lands, Layla decided to discuss the power of Soma. The mysterious brunette asked how much material would be needed to create an S-grade medicine, as it was a very high-quality remedy for treating severe illnesses. The experienced gamer confessed that he hadn't actually tried to make such a high-grade medicine and so he doesn't know exactly the exact amount of material needed. And to raise a D-grade restorative potion to C-grade, it would take 50 C-grade magic stones. And at the moment, it is possible to do the best at D-grade and unfortunately there is no certainty of successfully creating an S-grade medicinal potion. The girl was immediately upset, and the border lord asked Layla to explain exactly what was happening to her. But the distressed brunette whispered that this medicine was not needed for her. Soma then exclaimed that he would definitely try to make the best medicine possible and so Layla should not be upset but believe in success. The brunette wondered why Soma wanted to help her and why he was so kind, since they had only met yesterday. Soma reminded her again that a true lord had a duty to help his people and wasn't it obvious? Layla could not believe what was happening and continued to stare at the guy in surprise. Layla asked that isn't Soma being so honorable to everyone. Immediately after that Soma could finally see the brunette's status and that meant that she was now a resident of his territory. As it turned out the girl's age was 16 and she was indeed an adventurer with a pretty good measure of physical strength. That said, Layla was skilled in the art of the dagger, searching for enemies, detecting presence, and fire magic. The border lord was finally convinced of the veracity of the merchant's words, turned out to be an adventurer with rank 10. Meanwhile, Crush, who was trying to catch a fish, began to call loudly for help, for she had caught something completely different from what she wanted. A huge fish jumped out of the river and stunned the fragile blonde girl. The girl shouted that she had merely decided to pull Layla's fishing rod, which started to move. But suddenly this huge fish appeared. The Border Lord was stunned at the result of the fishing, because thanks to the improved fishing rod and Crush's fishing ability, he was able to catch such a huge monster. Soma quickly orientated himself to the situation and decided that this was a great chance to try out his skill inspiration. Meanwhile, quite expectedly, Layla rushed forward armed with her dagger. Thanks to her excellent fighting skills, the brave brunette quickly took down the huge fish. And then the joyful adventurer exclaimed that she was happy to work together with Lord Soma. Layla revealed that Landon Schwill, the lord of the neighboring town, is her client and she is on his assignment. The cat girl explained that Soma had suddenly appeared as a new lord in his territory and was immediately marked on the map. That was why Landon Schwill had sent her to gather the necessary information and find out how powerful the stranger was. Layla confessed that she just needed money, and this high-ranking man offered her a map that could lead to a legendary ore as a reward. The Border Lord surmised that the girl needed a lot of money for an expensive medicine. Layla confirmed this guess and revealed that such a medicine did indeed cost an astronomical amount of money. Layla then confessed that she did not quite trust her client Landon, because it was quite possible that the promised card was a trivial forgery. And even if the card were real, it is completely unknown how long it would take to earn the necessary amount of money for this drug. Crush asked her new friend what kind of medicine it was that needed so much money. Layla replied that such a drug is called Panacea, and it is of the highest S class. Many people say that this miraculous medicine can cure any disease. Layla explained that she was very hopeful about this medicine because her mom's petrification needed to be cured. Soma confessed that he does not like this lord who is going to secretly collect information about him, Landon, and at the same time it must be realized that this man is using Layla's weakness for his own purposes. The Border Lord offered to make Landon suffer a little. But Layla immediately resented it and explained that it would be very difficult to survive with such an attitude towards dangerous people. Soma promised not to do anything reckless and admitted that he wasn't too worried about you. But under no circumstances should that cunning person be allowed to destroy his achievements. And in doing so, the right panacea must be created for Layla. Crush declared that she would never allow her master to be harmed. The cat girl then asked for an explanation of how she could be of use to Soma. The perky blonde was pleased to have an addition to their team and stated that she looked forward to working with Layla. After a little thought, the young lord stated that he wanted to get straight to the point, and so everyone needed to discuss important matters together. Soma asked the young blonde to give him some time for a private conversation. The boy reminded about the fishing rod on which he applied his special lord abilities and then explained that he had a few more things he could do due to his status. The Border Lord talked about how he could make his territory bigger if he fulfilled certain conditions. Layla listened to her new master in amazement and still couldn't believe in such incredible power. Soma boasted that yesterday he had managed to increase the number of carrots he had planted in the field, and this added the necessary conditions to expand his territory. And since the young lord had managed to fulfill all the conditions, there was a new quest, fulfilling which he would finally be able to expand his territory. Soma confessed that now he was very eager to try to fulfill this quest, because this was the only way to develop further. But the most unpleasant thing is that in this quest you have to defeat monsters, so this task will obviously not be easy. Layla immediately realized that a demonstration of her strength was needed here, and Soma was pleased with this understanding. Crush was also enthusiastic about the new task and inquired about her role in this quest. The Border Lord explained to the blonde that if someone was suddenly injured, she would be in charge of healing with the recovery potion. And she herself should stay away from the monster, as it was very dangerous. Crush was willing to do anything and promised to try to be helpful. The young landowner decided and start the quest right away, and Layla supported this idea, for she was already ready to fight anyone. Soma went back to the system menu and confirmed his agreement to do the quest, for the sake of increasing his territory. The mission was to repel the attack of the savage monsters. The enemies included 10 wolves, 15 goblins, and 1 orc. Such a large number of monsters did not please Soma at all, and he told his concerns to Layla. The young lord also explained that they needed to repel the attack of wolves, goblins, and 1 orc. Layla immediately transformed from a sweet girl to a seasoned warrior and thought of a defense plan. Layla said that Orca is a very nasty creature and can be killed by 1 direct hit, as they are very strong monsters. but with Soma's support it might be possible to fight more effectively. Orc is a pig-faced creature with slow speed. These creatures have very thick skin and are strong enough to destroy even experienced adventurers. The Border Lord promised to definitely put his inspiration on Layla and Crush, and maybe it would add strength to the battle with the orc. Therefore, there was no need to worry prematurely right now. Suddenly the cat girl, thanks to her enhanced hearing, heard about the approach of some creatures. After a few minutes, and indeed a pack of grey wolves appeared, which were moving rather quickly. Layla immediately bared her blade and rushed forward, while Soma promised to join the battle after using inspiration. Layla already felt the excitement of the battle and exclaimed that it would be fun. The brunette wasted no time in launching an attack and quickly maneuvered between the monsters, dealing them deadly blows. The grey wolves didn't even realize how they had taken damage, and the brave cat girl declared that she could handle so many opponents on her own. At the same time, Layla felt a significant increase in strength thanks to Soma's inspiration. The young lord was delighted, for at last his ability came in handy in a real battle. Soma then decided to check Layla's stats, noticed a significant increase in parameters thanks to his inspiration. This was great news, for the girl's level was increasing very quickly. Although Layla's level wasn't that high at the moment, but it didn't affect the brave lady's fighting ability yet. Meanwhile, a group of embittered goblins appeared from the bushes. Layla attacked in the same way as last time. Gaining incredible speed, the girl simply swept through the ranks of goblins, simultaneously killing them. The monsters couldn't even react to such a daring attack. Soma thought that perhaps this girl warrior was using some stealthy actions. But at the same time, she moves at high speed and delivers deadly blows. And if Layla manages to kill opponents with just one blow, then it means inspiration is working effectively. After destroying the goblins, the main enemy orc finally showed up, and it required serious decisions. Layla once again gained incredible speed and was able to get behind the orc to deliver a series of blows with her dagger. But the orc's thick skin withstood such an attack and only infuriated the monster, who immediately tried to destroy the brunette. Watching this battle, Soma regretfully admitted that this time too, his assumption had come true. After all, even if the two attacks were pitted against each other, there would only be a few minor cuts on that huge monster that would not affect its condition in any way. Thanks to her incredible speed, Layla easily dodged the orc's blows and quickly changed her position. But unfortunately, none of Layla's attacks were able to do any damage to the enemy, and it was worth considering another method of combat. Soma thought about a solution to the problem, for it was clear that the cat girl's strength was not infinite. Suddenly, the Border Lord had an idea, and Soma asked Crush to immediately gather medicinal herbs as much as possible. The young blonde girl didn't even hesitate and agreed to carry out the orders. Soma remembered a failed alchemical experiment that resulted in an incredible explosion. And so it was necessary to use a similar remedy against the orc. That being said, Soma decided to back up and prepare several such improvised bombs. After about 5 minutes, Crush returned and said in an excited voice that this was all she had managed to gather in the area. Soma decided not to waste any time and thanked the girl for her help. The young landowner quickly took out an alchemy kit and decided that the surest way would be to simply mix the different ingredients in maximum quantity. As soon as the resulting liquid began to glow, Soma prepared to hurl it at the enemy, but before doing so the Lord warned Layla of the danger. The cat girl instantly moved out of range, and the orc froze with surprise and calmly watched as the glass container approached him. Samo watched his projectile without averting his gaze, and the result was not long in coming. The explosion was even stronger than the last time, and a cloud of fire hid the huge orc. Krug and Soma were stunned by the power of the explosion, and Layla, who was able to escape, felt the effects of the shockwave. The result was achieved, and Soma looked at the defeated monster. Surprised, rightly noticed that this explosion was much stronger than the one she had set off. The Border Lord didn't even have time to notice how quickly Layla approached him and struck him in the face. The cat girl was under the effects of adrenaline and screamed that it was dangerous. Layla demanded an explanation, for this disruption was more powerful than the most advanced magic. And if Soma possessed such a powerful weapon, it should have been used as soon as they saw the orc. Soma tried to justify himself and explained that he himself had not expected such an effect. The young lord wondered and wanted to find out why his blast was so powerful. After opening the characterization menu, Soma noticed that this time Crush had gathered C-class herbs, and perhaps that was what had affected the power of the explosion. The curious blonde noticed the gentleman's confusion and asked what was wrong. Soma looked at Crush's stats and noticed that all of her knowing skills had improved significantly and wondered if the girl was feeling the effects of the inspiration. The Border Lord surmised that the increase in the numerical value of the gathering skill had affected the quality of the medicinal herbs that the diligent blonde had gathered. Also in the part where Crush's numerical values are higher than others. It could be something that Crush has an aptitude for and that greatly affects the girl. That being said, Layla's dexterity has increased significantly. The cat girl immediately after the battle asked if Soma's domain had expanded. The young landowner asked to wait for 1 minute while he checked his status. The first thing Soma saw was a message that the task had been successfully completed. Then a strange menu appeared that offered to select one of the suggested items to develop the territory. It was offered to simply expand his territory or fortify the facilities on the outer territories. There was also an option to build new objects. It was also possible to increase the level of monsters present in the territory, and the last suggestion was to increase the level of materials present in the territory. At the very end of the list of options for improving the area was a random action suggestion. Soma was immediately interested in this option, but Layla shouted for the Lord not to do so. But Soma still made the choice, and this angered the cat girl. Layla started to get indignant and said that it was real stupidity to choose something you don't know anything about, because that way you could get some useless rubbish and waste your opportunity to get something important. But Soma would disagree with the accusations and explain that if they were lucky they could get a new territory, and in general it was a great opportunity to test their luck. Then the Border Lord cheerfully exclaimed that not many vagabonds would come to work in such a remote place to work anyway. Layla resented such a comparison and angrily said that she was not a tramp at all and there was no need to make fun of her. The curious blonde Crush asked what other options there were for improving on the territory. But Soma didn't bother to answer and wondered what would actually fall to him at random. But the blonde wasn't going anywhere, and yet the Border Lord explained that there was an option to expand the territory, strengthen the facilities in the territory, and build a new facility. Then one could choose to raise the level of the monsters inhabiting the steep lands or increase the quality of the materials present in the area, and finally one could choose a random action. At the same time, Soma explained that raising the level of monsters was out of the question because there was now a lack of strength and it would make it difficult to fight against reinforced opponents. It was also a low priority to upgrade the quality of materials, they're much dependent on Crush's abilities. Layla exclaimed that the ideal option would be to expand the territory, and the young blonde suggested opting for new facilities. But the cat girl reminded her new friend that they had no people to manage the new buildings. Soma said that in such a case, expanding the territory would do no good in terms of numbers, and it was a completely useless choice. Layla agreed with the Lord's reasoning but still angrily reprimanded. Soma reiterated that the ideal choice is a random action and asked to believe in his luck. But Layla was skeptical of such an idea and was not sure that they would be lucky in this case. But the young landowner stated that he had participated in lotteries a lot, and so he had a feeling that everything would be fine. In the end, Soma proudly raised a finger and said that he was confident in himself and his choice. Judging from the faces of the girls, they were completely disagreeing with this decision. The guy explained that whichever of the girls was luckier would be the one to play the prank, and he would personally choose. In doing so, his personal luck would not matter. Layla chose at the right moment to confirm the choice, and Soma instantly activated the random selection. The young lord realized that he had no choice because he was probably the only one who could use this crystal. Layla irritatedly asked for a clearer explanation since she knew absolutely nothing about such magical tricks. Layla asked if she understood correctly that she had a completely bad case of ability. In the end, as it turned out, the young blonde was the lucky one in this prank, who was happy for any success. Crush excitedly said that since she was born she has never once had a stomach ache from eating wildflowers. And it's really a blessing when every time she didn't suffer from such a thing. But Soma explained that it was all due to the blonde's skills, and luck had nothing to do with it at all. Such words stunned the naive blonde, and she froze in place for a moment. The joy was quickly replaced by sadness, and Kirsch began to cry again and told her that she was really unlucky because she had been fired many times and couldn't even be a maid. Then Layla suggested to press the right buttons quickly, and Soma agreed not to waste time because it would be much better. After thinking a little about everything that was going on, Soma declared that he would press and make his choice after all. The girls immediately fell silent and waited with interest for the results. Instantly, a magic cloud appeared above their heads, and the joyful young lord stated that perhaps they would get a very cool item. Soma expected to obtain a very high-ranked weapon that could be sold for a very large amount of money. But the wait was short-lived and an object resembling an ordinary hammer appeared in front of the Border Lord's face. Soma was shocked by such an object, for it was an ordinary rubber mallet and it was not clear how it could help in the development of the territory. The Border Lord was angry at such a ridiculous gift and threw the rubber mallet as far away as possible. Soma shouted that it was a complete failure, and at that moment the guy was very embarrassed to look at his assistants. Layla rushed to reassure her new master and suggested that if the hammer looked so strange, perhaps it was an excellent weapon. The Border Lord was incredulous at the girl's words and asked if she really thought the rubber mallet was a serious weapon. Soma calmed down a bit and decided to check the received object and used a magic crystal. To the young lord's surprise, the parameters of the rubber mallet indicated that the weapon was of S rank and was sacred. Soma read the information several times and informed the girls of the high status of the item he had received. The Border Lord looked at the ridiculous-looking rubber hammer and thought that perhaps this sacred weapon was perhaps made especially for him by the divine power that had transported him to this fantasy world. Soma didn't know who the godlike being was, but he sensed how powerful it was. Soma asked his assistants if they knew anything about sacred weapons. Layla explained that sacred weapons are possible because they are created by people who live in temples. And so detailed information can only be obtained there. The cat girl then asked her partner if she could tell her something about sacred weapons. But the former maid had no idea about such magical things. The Border Lord noticed the blonde crush's strange condition and asked if she was all right. The girl hesitantly replied that she was fine, but Layla advised her friend to rest. Crush explained that she was just very surprised when she heard about the sacred weapon. The young blonde then explained that she had heard that sacred weapons could only be created by a god. And judging from the rumors, such weapons are created specifically to eliminate the difficulties of the human world. Soma looked at the rubber hammer with disbelief and thought that it was too strange a weapon to eliminate such global problems. The Border Lord asked Crush if she knew what kind of difficulties to eliminate and how to use the linked weapon at all. But the blonde replied apologetically that she did not know anything specific and all she knew was only people's rumors. Layla was surprised at such knowledge of Crush and asked if she worked in the temple. Crush admitted that she had indeed worked briefly as a servant, but that it was a long time ago. The young blonde told of how she had made a rather big mistake and therefore could not stay in the temple. Meanwhile, in the huge and majestic temple, the priests had gathered and were holding a general meeting. The chief priest reported that on the western border of the kingdom of Helgen, the god had created a sacred weapon. And this weapon is a red hammer with a yellow handle. It is a sacred weapon that in the past was wielded by brave heroes who killed the demon king himself. And now this priceless artifact is in the possession of an unknown hero from another land. One of the novices asked if this event meant that someone worthy of such a great title had appeared. And if it is a distant land, it is quite possible that only weapons have been born there. And so it is imperative that one must go in search of the sacred weapon as soon as possible. The ministers realized that it was a very dangerous place with many uncharted territories, and it was too dangerous to go there in search of sacred weapons. Then one of the novices reminded them that if this territory was on the western border, there was a town called Cheville nearby. And it would be quite reasonable to ask for the help of Lord Landon, who would not be able to refuse the priests of the kingdom. But the chief abbot of the temple was skeptical of the idea and said that he knew the Lord well and it was unlikely that such a man would lend a helping hand. And if a new hero is really born in those lands, Lord Landon will try to kill him to get his powers, because this man is very greedy and loves power too much. Also, Lord Landon is very fond of money, and if they manage to get hold of the sacred weapon, he will definitely try to sell it for a huge amount of money. The clerics decided that in that case they should go in search of the sacred weapon right now, because a real disaster would happen if that greedy lord could find the sacred weapon. The decision was made to embark on an immediate expedition into uncharted lands. At this point, the chief knight of the temple asked permission to do this for the sake of the church and promised to do his best to find the sacred weapon before Lord Landon, a week after Soma received the sacred weapon, went to the slime forest. The guy stated that it had been a long time since they had gone out with Crush to nature. The young blonde about the fact that after the appearance of Layla, they all the time cares and forgot about holidays at all. Border Lord agreed with Crush and stated that besides with Layla there were many problems that had to be solved. The young blonde then suddenly asked if Soma could help her with one problem if she talked about it. From the look on Crush's face, she didn't immediately decide to have this conversation. The caring blonde explained that if Soma now had a sacred weapon, he would definitely be declared a hero in the temple. The girl was very worried and even began to tremble from it. Then she just fell silent and did not dare to express her thoughts anymore. Soma realized how difficult it was for this young girl and gently stroked her head. Then the young lord asked Crush not to worry and stop thinking bad thoughts, for she was his subject and he would never part with her. Soma then explained that if Crush had any problems, all he had to do was just say something about them and then he would do his best to help his loved one. Such kind words brought tears to the girl's eyes and she immediately hurried to wipe them away. Crush thanked her master and Soma advised her not to worry about anything. The girl then calmed down and inquired about the purpose for which they had come to the forest today. Soma explained that he expected to try out some of Crush's skills. The girl was surprised by this answer and asked what exactly Soma wanted to do. But the young lord explained that he first wanted to explain the current situation in their territory, because he had managed to learn a lot in the time he had spent here. Soma recalled that he had completed a task that helped to raise the level of the territory and now its strength had reached the second level and all the production rates had also increased. Therefore, the territory was successfully leveled after choosing the right option. And since it was possible to obtain the sacred weapon, there was actually no visible change in the territory. Soma explained that this was why he wanted to raise the level of his territory more and more, because one cannot stop development and must move towards the best. The young lord explained that there are a total of 4 main points to raise the level of the territory and one should raise each of them. The main parameters are strength, agriculture, and trade industry. Strength increased mainly when the number of inhabitants of a territory increased or when a new building was created, so the process of increasing strength depended on different factors. Next is agriculture, and the only way to increase this parameter is to increase the level of fields for the time being and increase the number and variety of vegetable crops. However, there is a possibility that you can increase the level by building a separate farm to raise livestock. Also very important is the trade parameter, which can be increased by trading with people. And maybe if they could manage to open some shops in their territory, the whole economy would increase a lot, which would bring a huge income. Another important parameter of course is industry, and it is currently the fastest growing industry in the entire territory. Industry is increased through alchemy or blacksmithing, and the higher the difficulty level, the faster this parameter grows. The border lord explained that due to Crush's ability to gather rare medicinal plants, he can create regenerating medicines, and the merchant bin buys potions, and it makes a good income. The diligent blonde promised to always fulfill any of her master's errands. Soma confessed that at the moment he can't raise the level of his alchemical abilities because he needs D-rank magic stones. And so it would be a good idea to obtain them to raise his level. Soma said that from the monsters he killed during the quest, he managed to collect some magic stones, among which were rank E stones, and from the orc he managed to get a rank C stone. Soma surmised that apparently the level of magic stones is proportional to the strength of the monsters, hence their quality value. The young lord then explained that he wanted to test this possibility, and due to the activation of the Crush skill, his own strength was increased and should be developed further. Soma explained that the tree branch he was holding was still E rank, and so he wanted to see if it was possible to influence this tree branch. After all, Crush's skill level had also increased since the last time they had tried it. Soma asked the faithful blonde girl to take this branch in her hands, and the girl immediately hurriedly complied with the request. The parameters of the ordinary wooden stick still remained E rank, and the fact that the girl picked it up had no effect on the item's condition. The young lord then checked Crush's parameters and found out that the blonde girl currently possessed level 6 gathering skills. Soma surmised that the lack of change in the item was simply a lack of level, and perhaps it was completely irrelevant to the wooden stick. Soma then decided to test another theory and asked the girl to take the wooden stick in her hands again so that he could use his inspiration ability at that moment. This time the experiment was successful and the ordinary wooden stick gained D rank, thus pleasing the young lord. Soma said that he probably didn't have enough levels and needed at least 10 levels. That way, he would be able to strengthen the house even more. Crush was happy that she was able to help her master and said that she would go immediately to gather more materials. Soma thanked his loyal assistant and promised to wait for her. After about half an hour the girl returned and they followed home. The materials collected were sufficient, and Soma reported that he had learned additional information that his ability to inspire was only effective for 1 minute. The young lord was glad that he was no longer alone in his territory and thanked the young blonde for being there for him. But in the midst of the conversation Soma let his guard down and his foot collided with a cleverly placed rope. Suddenly his rubber mallet appeared in front of the young landowner's face and it caused an unpleasant surprise. Soma, trying to restrain his emotions, moved the sacred weapon away from his face and immediately saw a smiling Layla, who came out from behind a tree. The girl with a satisfied look asked if the effect was really good. As it turned out, while Soma and Crush were walking through the forest, Layla decided to show off her intellectual abilities and set a clever trap that the lord of this territory easily fell for. An hour afterwards, all the inhabitants of this territory were sitting around the table in the house having lunch. Soma asked the cat girl if she could make something like an Aruko. Layla pondered the answer and explained that she didn't quite know what she was talking about. The blonde Crush stated that it was a special trap that made a loud noise when someone touched the taut rope. Soma agreed and stated that this was roughly what he meant. The young lord then reminded them that there were only 3 of them in the area so far. And so he thought they needed such a trap to warn themselves against a surprise attack. Soma also explained that they couldn't rely only on Layla's presence detection ability all the time, because that would take a lot of the girl's energy. In the end, Layla promised to look into the matter and said that she would try to create something very good for their safety. Soma tried to voice his opinion, but the cat girl asked not to worry and promised to make such a perfect trap that everyone would marvel at her abilities. But Soma still reminded that her trap in the slime forest was too mediocre and it was unlikely that such a trap would help against real enemies. Layla's mood instantly changed, as she didn't like criticism of herself. Layla exclaimed indignantly that her trap was wonderful. Soma asked why Layla had decided to hit him with a rubber mallet in the first place, and so unexpectedly. The cat girl explained that this was her way of showing off her ingenuity. But the young lord replied that in this way, it was only to show the uninvited guests that someone actually lived here. Layla was furious at this criticism and could not restrain her emotions. Layla started arguing again and explained that it was just a prototype trap and next time she would definitely make a much better one. And Soma would admire her ability and ingenuity. Soma was careless again and hooked the same rope with his foot, which activated the rubber mallet, and that sacred artifact met the young lord's face again. This time Soma could no longer contain his anger and immediately tried to pour it out on the cat girl, but Layla shouted that this time it was not her doing. The young blonde girl also refused to take responsibility for the trap and claimed that she didn't do anything. Soma was surprised by what had happened and stated that if that was the case, someone was on his property. The young gentleman asked Layla to say about the surroundings. Cat girl confessed that she was also very surprised he at the moment could not explain what was happening in any way. Soma then suggested to start by exploring the slug forest to see if they could find anything interesting. Upon reaching an open area, the young lord pointed to a point ahead and explained that this was about the middle of his territory. Soma admitted that this distance was more than he thought and he could not say for sure where the unknown guests might have come from. The young landowner then inquired just in case Layla had a weapon with her. The girl replied that she even sleeps with her dagger, and this reassured Soma a little. The guy then asked Crush to gather some healing plants but warned her not to leave her line of sight and to be extremely careful. The faithful blonde, as usual, promised to do the right thing. Soma explained to his assistants that if anything went wrong, he would be sure to set off an explosion like the last time with the orc. Layla was extremely wary and agreed with the master's plan. But then the cat girl's incredible instincts were able to warn of the presence of intruders in advance, and after a few minutes Layla pointed out the direction from where the enemies were approaching. But suddenly from the shadows of the trees came out of the old familiar merchant bin accompanied by an unknown knight. The merchant was as friendly as ever and said that he was happy to meet Soma again. The young lord and his loyal assistants were surprised at this unexpected and strange appearance of the merchant, because usually Bin's visit is quite different. But then Soma invited the guest into his house as usual and asked if the merchant's goods were to be checked again today. Bin explained that their joint business could wait for the time being and then introduced his attendants, who turned out to be knights from the temple. According to the merchant, these honorable men were looking for something important in the area and he had to assist them. Soma explained that he immediately noticed the difference in atmosphere and the unusual number of escorts. The young lord then inquired if the presence of these knights from the temple was related to him. Bin replied without hesitation that indeed these knights were looking for Soma. The merchant explained that he had to tell the knights about Soma's ability to instantly determine the technical condition of any goods. And since he personally works with the temple, these noble ministers of religion had asked him for help. Soma did not argue with the merchant in the presence of outsiders and only asked what exactly they were looking for on his property. Being confessed that this expedition to distant lands had to do with the search for so-called sacred weapons, which appeared to be very important to the temple. The trader explained that the temple officials had information that such sacred weapons had only recently appeared in the area, and so they were in a great hurry to find out the details. And since it is a very important artifact that can affect the state of the whole world, the servants of the religion are obliged to find it as soon as possible to avoid global problems. Soma decided not to hide the truth, as he wouldn't be able to escape the attention of these serious knights anyway. The young lord calmly showed his rubber mallet, and this caused an unexpected reaction from the head knight. The formidable man shrouded in iron armor instantly approached Soma. The huge knight hissed towards Soma that he was a real scumbag and how could he display some ridiculous toy. The temple protector's face displayed incredible anger, and the knight asked how Soma dared to mock them and promised the young lord a lot of serious problems.